everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Future Focus CXO. I have a very interesting guest today, and learning about his journey is going to be really insightful. So please let me welcome Naseer Chanda. He's the CEO of Paymerang. Naseer, welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself and also share your career journey, particularly how you raised to be a CEO of Paymerang?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thank you, Jay. A bit of background on Paymerang first. Paymerang is in the finance automation space. What we do is we provide the office of the CFO software and processes to help them automate accounts payable, whether it's the approval of invoices, the posting of invoices into general ledger, the extraction of data from the invoices, or the payment of those invoices to their vendors. And we help them pay them electronically, whether it's via virtual card or ACH or another method. And what we're trying to do is give these offices of the CFO thousands of hours back, help them to be more efficient, more secure, and create new revenue streams for them. And we do this for corporations across the country in healthcare, education, manufacturing, hospitality, services. We're in a pretty broad spectrum of verticals. And we typically do this for mid-market companies with anywhere in revenue in the low end of, say, $25 million and a high end of $1 billion. That's Paymerang. We've been growing nicely. We are about 300 people now. We've grown from 25 people about 6 years ago. So we've had a nice growth trajectory. We've been an Inc. 5000 company 4 years in a row, top workplace enrichment 5 years in a row, and best and brightest in the nation 5 years in a row. The business is probably 10x the growth now since I started, and we have a phenomenal culture, a great group of people, and very loyal customers who we love and they love us. So that's Paymerang. I came to be CEO here in 2017. I started my career actually in investment banking and moved into a corporate development role at Brink, the global security company, and took on over time the role of starting up their payments business and launching it and getting it to about 100 million in sales. So I've been in payments for over 20 years now. The CEO role isn't something that I was actively looking for. I was looking to create value and do fun things. And what I learned being CEO is we are all here to serve others. We're here to grow other people. If we can multiply ourselves through 10, 20 other people and they can all be successful, that's a much better impact than me helping myself. So every day when I walk in here, I say to myself, how can I help other people grow, have fun in their careers? The Culture Code is a good book. It talks about how do you make people feel good about the work they're doing and their future at the company. And they should have 3 things that they should feel affinity to in the company. Number 1, they feel safe and secure in the company and that they can perform their job and be successful at it. Number 2, they feel connected to the mission of the company and the people that they work with. They feel like there's a community there and there's a mission that really is powerful to them. It's beyond the money. The third is they feel a connection to a future at that company, a future where they can grow across functions, leading people eventually, and feel fulfilled that there's scope for them. Because if there's no scope, we hit a ceiling, then we feel like we don't think there's a future. And so that's what we try to build here. It's a very values-driven organization. Everybody knows the values, we live them. Good to Great is another important book for me that's helped me shape my way that I try to lead. And with this paradox of the level 5 leader, which is the humility and competitiveness at the same time. Because typically those are opposed, right? A humble person typically isn't competitive. A competitive person is typically not humble. How do you incorporate both of those at the same time, in the same day, in the same brain, and lead an organization? And it requires a lot of practice and a lot of humility and relearning, readjusting yourself every day.
And one thing I'll tell you, being the CEO running my company, we are also growing pretty fast. One important thing, one of my mentor had told me almost 7-8 years back, which resonated right now, what you said is, you have to be very deliberate in building the culture. Otherwise, culture is going to get built. Something is going to happen, right? And you're not going to like that. So it better be diligent. The 3 points you said, the way you are building it, right? In our company, we call it a collaborative culture because not everybody knows everyone. Salesforce is like a huge ocean, right? So it's okay to say, I have not done it or I don't know this and ask for help and collaboratively get things done, because ultimately what matters is delivering this project for the customer, right?
Yes, I'll build on that. I think it's important for us to remember we're not alone, because it's lonely at the top and it's lonely as a leader. It's lonely if you're leading a team, a group, a company, but you're not alone. So the collaboration is important. Sometimes you're in a crisis and you find yourself alone, and then you just have to look around you. There's all these amazing, talented people who are waiting to help you. It's us together.
I want to ask you more about Paymerang, but what sort of motivated the transition from investment banking and corporate development into pure corporate leadership as you started shifting?
Yeah, 10 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I was really a consultant, which means I would come in help a company and then leave and go help another company. And I saw a lot of people become millionaires. Not that I was after the money, but I saw people build businesses and then succeed and get the fruits of that work that they did. Whereas as a consultant, I would come in, support, and go off and do something else. If I came back 2 years later, I might find that the work I did was implemented or was not. But I didn't feel ownership. I didn't feel like that connection for a long-term perspective. I wanted to build. And as a consultant, you don't really build, you advise. So I switched into corporate to build. And I started in corporate development for Brinks. But then I had another journey where I was doing that, and someone gave me the opportunity to lead a small growing business unit in payments that we had started organically within the corp dev team. And they said, it's time to lead this thing. At that point, I asked a mentor of mine what they thought. They said, I did the same transition. I went from a staff or functional role, corporate role, to owning a P&L. And he said, on the one hand, it is exhilarating because you now own something and it's your thing and you build it. On the other hand, you can't hide. And you're only as good as your last month of results.
Yes.
He said, you got to be ready for that because you'll find that there's a lot of transparency, nowhere to hide. Every single day when you walk in the door. So several transitions, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Wow. So I have a question about Paymerang. I want to know, how are you keeping your company ahead of this evolving technology? Fintech is going through massive transformation as we see. Gen AI and AI in general is actually influencing our life. We always keep saying that AI will not replace you, but the person using AI will replace you.
Yeah.
I think similar also goes to the SaaS companies, right? AI may not replace a SaaS product, but another SaaS product who's effectively implemented AI will replace you, right? So how are you keeping yourself appraised of it? How do you think about it as a CXO? Because a lot of CXOs out there are losing their sleep over this.
I think you have to start with jobs to be done and start with one thing at a time and do it really well using AI. Because if AI is a big term and you could boil the ocean and say, you could go to your company and say, let's get AI across the board. And next thing everyone's thinking about AI. We just heard that Apple is now abandoning the car project. Have you heard that recently?
Yeah.
2,000 engineers are going to have to find something else to do. The point is, they had a big initiative. They put 10 years or so into it, and now they're dismantling it. The best way I've heard to use AI is to find important jobs that can be done with AI. Something small, it doesn't have to be huge. Do that really well and build upon it. One step at a time, I think, is a very nice iterative approach. For example, in our space, AI could potentially help to identify within a large group of payments some fraudulent payments through looking at relationships or invoices. If we could just use it to provide those insights and then build that as a nice little feature that gets added to the product experience, and someone who's using the product, when they say, hey, what's that thing on the side? And they go hover over it and it tells them what it's doing. Now you have a delightful moment with your customer. Your R&D team feels like they got a win, right? And it could be small, but at least it's something versus a broad narrative of we have to start using AI.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And where AI is today, it's more what you just said. Microsoft created a term for it called co-pilots, right?
Yeah.
Have a co-pilot which can help you, delight you, give you some insights which will quickly help you do that task easily.
That's right. And co-pilot in 5 years is going to be very different from now. But if they started with the 5-year version now, no one would know how to use it and everyone would be confused and it probably wouldn't be as advanced. So there's a stepping stone approach to these things, which I think they did the right thing with it. And yeah, we're definitely giving it a shot.
Yeah, but that also leads to my follow-up question on this. As interesting and important it is, right? It also poses a lot of potential risks, right? Or in terms of business compliance, AI has hallucination, bias, a lot of challenges. So how do you balance this between what I would like to roll out? See, POC doing is very easy. From POC to production, that bridge is really long and hard. So how do you balance that?
That's the term co-pilot. Co means there's a human along with the machine. And we're doing this together iteratively so that I don't wake up in 5 years and I have a black box that I don't know what it does. What's happening is we do have a lot of black boxes out there. I've seen instances of people using sentiment analysis or different types of tools to look at buyer intent on your website. They put it in like a black box. It's going to analyze the intent and it's going to spit out some things and then you're going to have automation. But the results were not there Because, for example, people coming to your website could be people looking for a job. They may not be buyers. They could be people who are competitors. Different people could be coming to your website. So if you fully automate on day one without thinking about it and having a human side by side, that's the danger.
Let me pivot off the technology. I'm more passionate about culture and company culture as well. And you clearly have a heart for this, right? If you read on, you study it, you exercise it. One of the biggest things I see is companies lose their grip on what they thought their culture was as they hire and you've moved to 300 employees. The culture executes a little bit differently, or it has to be managed differently. So how did you deal with maintaining that company culture during rapid growth?
Yeah, let me compound your problem first.
Please.
What happens is you'll see companies with a culture deck online. You'll see a website, and then you go to Glassdoor and you see something very different. So there is a disparity of what the company thinks is their culture and then what it really is an experience. So I'll go back to what Jay said about being deliberate about culture. That's the essence of it, really, is if you don't get deliberate about it, it will get deliberate with you. It will take on its own life. So what we said, we started with values, really. We said, what are the norms and behaviors that we will look back on and say, hey, these are the things that got us here, and these are the things that are going to take us to the next stage. I always say there's three things every employee that walks into a company or turns on their computer every day should know. Number one, what is the purpose of the company? Why does it exist? And if the company went away, would the world care? Number two, what are the things that the company is going to do? What are the strategic choices that you're going to allocate your money and your time to? And the third is, how are you going to do those things? What is the culture to support those things? So culture, I think, is one of the pillars. And I think being deliberate about it, knowing your values to start with is critical. In other words, if one of your values is passion and positivity, passion about the work you're doing, positivity about the interactions between each other, and you have a lot of people who are just very doubtful and combative with each other, and you haven't addressed that, then you should not have that value. You either change the value or you start to really live it. But if you're not deliberate about saying it, every time you see something deviate, and that's the deliberate part, then you have a problem because it's just a snowball. It's going to keep growing. You can't let things fester when it comes to culture. Sometimes you actually have to be a little bit preemptive in a sense. Okay, these are the values. And then you start to see something going the wrong direction, to Jay's point about being deliberate. You have to get the company together and say, look, one of our values is being customer focused, but I'm listening to phone calls, support calls, and I'm seeing these notes of the account management reviews. And I'm seeing this trend, which is getting away from this. So let's all drop what we're doing. Let's talk about this because we're starting to see some deviation of that. When we were going past 100 people, they said, okay, Paymerang's been a great workplace, but I think we're going to change. But we maintained that amazing culture to 200. Then they said, oh, 200, now you're really going to be in trouble. It's going to change. At 300, we're still able to do that. Last thing I would say is cadence of communication. So we have a weekly all hands, we have a quarterly town hall, and a daily stand-up for every team. So that's a lot of coming together, talking about being accountable to each other. What did we do yesterday? What are we doing today? Why did we make these strategic decisions? Who are the new people joining our team? All those things I think help.
Now, I have just one quick follow-up question because you said you merged together, right, with the company, and merger poses a great risk on culture because people from different culture are joining you now, like two families getting married, right? There's always a challenge, right? So how did you manage maintaining your culture and most importantly, getting those people included in your culture? That is one part of the question. And second is then identifying the leaders, saying that who is actually good to lead which departments.
Those are a great question. On the first one, we bought several companies. They were smaller than we were. But when we were looking at those companies, we assessed the technology, the sales go-to-market, the financials, but we also assessed the culture and asked ourselves, is this going to be a good fit for us? For all the deals that we have done, there are many deals that we did not do because we didn't feel like there was a good fit. So I think you got to assess it before, and then once you merge, you got to make sure that it's one platform, one company, one group of people.
So do you find that's like you put a, whereas you said deliberate, like when you're making a decision, like you're looking at two companies essentially financially look the same, product set looks the same, client base looks the same, but culture fit look very different. How much weight do you give that when it comes to, as a CFO, they'd be like, this one's going to make us more from what it looks like today, but from a culture perspective, a bad merger can wreck the ship, right? So
yeah, it can wreck the ship, and then you have a lot of distracted people putting out fires and a lot of inefficient bickering that could happen. So those are the things that we look at. I think we've done a good job of that. It's never perfect. It's a lot of people, a lot of feelings and contextual things. And that probably takes us to talent management and who leads what. The one thing we found as well is when we bought companies, we got some great people who have new skill sets that we didn't even know they had until we brought them on board. You got to keep your eyes really open when you do this. It can't be this idea of not invented here, not built here, meaning we're superior, we're buying them, they need to just go away. No, it has to be, they're coming, we got new people, as you said, this two families are coming together and there's new skill sets, new ideas. You got to allow that to percolate. And you also have to give some roles to their leaders. Otherwise, you're giving a message. In other words, their leaders have to lead some things in your organization.
Yes. I think if you're open to the concept of people coming with different skills into my family, the whole objective and outlook changes of how we do things, right? Versus what you just said, saying that I bought you, you listen to me or go away. That is not going to give good messages and going to hurt the culture at the end of the day.
This might be a good time to talk about something I think that's very important in business is the ego. It's human, first of all, to have an ego, but I found it to be a very destructive thing as well. That if we were driven by ego, meaning I need, I want, versus what we need and what we want, I've seen it over and over. That ego can really get in the way of a lot of progress. So we have to find a way as leaders to push the ego aside. And it's not easy to do because we have a lot of responsibility and that comes with maybe a lot of authority too.
With that, you've created a solid culture. You've grown rapidly. You're in the fintech space, which is a vibrant and growing market. But how do you think about some of the new challenges that are coming along just economically around the fintech industry? How is it affecting the investment decisions, both in access to capital, choices on how to get capital, how to develop and grow, but also the way to keep Paymerang as a product development agile and adaptable to the current conditions? So thinking about it on a CFO scale and just how are you making those decisions as a C-suite leader in fintech right now?
One of the big things over the last 2-3 years was a massive change in the market from a frothy, liquid, large amount of capital going in to a restrictive environment because the stock markets were going sideways. There was a decline. So that created less money coming into the space. That's the first thing. So what we had to do was hunker down and build for a longer term. And a lot of companies that were in it to burn cash were burning less cash. Paymerang was never doing the burn cash thing. We were trying to focus on building a profitable, growing business. So we didn't have to make a huge pivot there. But we did say people are not going to only look at revenue multiples, they're going to look at EBITDA multiples. So how do we make sure we have a strong, growing EBITDA? The other thing is there's still a fair bit of consolidation in our space and parties getting larger. And so they have more resources. So we had to be efficient with our capital. We had to really find ways on our go-to-market. LTV to CAC had to be in the right place. When we go to trade shows, we're very specific about the trade shows we go to. They have to have good ROI. And it's typically not those big national shows. So we have to be conservative with our cash. And the third thing is regulations will continue in the fintech space to grow. You had the failure of the banks. So fintechs are actually poised to fill in where the banks can't. But at the same time, if they over-regulate the banks, they're going to regulate us too. So we have to just have our mind open to that.
I would say the last question I have is, as a seasoned finance executive, what sort of key learnings would you share with other leaders? As you said, you have mentors. If you're mentoring other C-suite leaders or other leaders aspiring to the roles you've had, what would you give them as guidance to help them succeed in their careers?
We've talked about leadership, we've talked about culture, we talked about making good choices, and we talked about trends and AI, et cetera. I think the one thing I would say to every leader and every organization is you should know the stage of your company because different stages of companies have different needs. From the startup to kind of 5 million revenue range, it's a different type of a journey. It's a journey of innovation, tweaking, very flat organizations, very responsive, and a little bit almost chaotic, right? Priorities change every day. As you scale from the 5 to, let's say, the 50, now you're bringing structure, now you're scaling, now you're doing what you did well with one person, now you need to do across 10 people. And so you have to bring structure into it. But there's still a level of entrepreneurship and creativity and innovation. Now going from 50 to, let's say, 500, there's a whole different level of scaling. And that's about taking processes and making it repeatable and documented. It requires a different mindset. I think the same person can switch between those mindsets. but you have to be really honest with yourself. Are you going to enjoy that next mindset? And are you ready to make the change? And it can't be small, gradual increments. You sometimes have to make pretty radical changes.
Could you give me an example of the ones that you had to deal with that was particularly challenging for yourself, that took a lot to make it
Let's
through?
talk about Paymerang's go-to-market. When I started here, there was one salesperson, and we built it up today to about a 40+ person team with all the pillars. We have the inside sales team, we have the outside sales team, we have the partnership team, we have the trade show team, etc. There's a lot of different pillars to this. And to go from one salesperson to that, we had to radically change how we built those pillars. Though we did build those pillars one at a time, with the first person hired and then the process put in place, etc. But now that each of those pillars could have 10 people in them, to get to the next stage, I have to keep shifting, and the team around us has to keep shifting to help the organization get there. That maybe what got us here is not going to get us there. So that process, that call script, those daily cadences will have to change.
Jay, do you have any other questions or thoughts before we pass it off?
Oh, yes, I think we can talk for a long time. Naseer. Our last conversation was very insightful. One thing that we had touched upon in the last conversation is about keeping and building this relationship with mentors, right? Because it's, as it is very hard to find mentors, it is also hard to keep up with them, right? Keep that relationship with them, right? And consuming that advice. Not every time we like what they tell us, right? When we go and talk to them, because I experienced the same thing. So how would you go about doing that? And you have very successfully done that.
Sure. I have a great mentor that I met with a couple of weeks ago, and it was a difficult conversation. And he didn't really sugarcoat it. He just said, look, you're doing this wrong. You have to fix this. And the way you're telling me this, I don't really believe you. He was pretty direct with me. The first thing about having a mentor is trusting that there's value there. Sometimes we think to ourselves, I'm too busy and no one's going to understand the details. I'm in the details. They're not going to understand it. And I just need to get power through this. But sometimes you should actually step away, speak to your mentor. The mentor, if we pick them right, have a lot of experience. They have a lot of wisdom to share with us, right? And they could look at this, not get all the details, and still tell you, listen, looking at this from further away, I can be more objective than you can. Let me really tell it to you like it is. So we have to realize that there's value in that, and we can't just dismiss it. The second part is be ready to listen. And every feedback is a gift, right? So I don't go to get a lot of compliments. My mom gives me lots of compliments. What I need is someone who's going to be really honest with me. And that's what I was looking for. So again, the ego is a really bad thing in business. You got to put it aside and open yourself up to really improve. I had a friend of mine, he told me this once. He goes, if anyone gives me feedback, whether they're a nice person and they intend to be good or bad, I don't care, because I'm getting value. I'm getting free advice, right? And I said, what if the intention is bad? He goes, it's okay. I still want to hear that. There might be something in there.
Correct, absolutely. I had one more question, and you can choose not to answer it. You also gave your personal story, your parents, how they struggled, where deliberately you focused on building yourself with education and with opportunities and other things, and you reached here. It is a hard journey. I always believe that we underestimate when we talk to somebody. We always feel, oh, life is easy for him, right? He got it easily, right? That's natural. It comes. So I went through more hardships than other person. I definitely want you to tell that story if you feel comfortable with it, because that's very inspiring. I think 80% of us is going to feel my life is easy now when I listen to you. So do you mind sharing that with us?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for asking. My parents were born in India. They lived through the partition, which was a very difficult, tragic time.
Yeah.
My dad was a lawyer back home, came here when I was 6 years old, and we didn't have a lot of money. And he ended up working in retail and taking a bus to work from being a lawyer back home. So it was a big step back for him. By the way, they grew up in refugee camps, and I saw those refugee camps back home, and they're very difficult places to live and grow up. But still, my mom always used to say we had some of the best times in our life there, because there was 10 of us in a small room, 1-bedroom apartment, and we had each other. We didn't have a lot of food, we didn't have a lot of money, but we still had a great community. Then we came here, didn't have a lot of money. We struggled. The interest rates were 15% growing up when my parents bought their first house. And they had a very hard time making payments. And there are times when my dad was unemployed and we could have lost our house, but we kept on powering through. I realized that I had to start working early. And so I started delivering newspapers when I was 12 years old. And then I
Wow.
worked at McDonald's 14, 15. And through that, I was able to save for college. I was able to pay for my own clothes and things like that and help my parents out. I would not change any of that for the world. It taught me to work hard. It
Right.
taught me to value money and use it wisely. And it taught me to be grateful. So as I grew up and went to college and paid for my own college, and I never stopped working since that day I started doing newspapers. I've been working since then, and I don't see myself retiring anytime soon. That's not really something on my mind. But the idea that hard work trumps talent, IQ, etc., is true, in my opinion. But I think we have to find something that clicks in our mind, because we have kids, we have friends, and we're like, they have so much potential, but they're not getting there, right? I think everybody can get there. It's not something that's predestined for. I think we have the ability to transcend our circumstances, but the hard work, there's no replacement for it. So my advice is find the thing you love and work hard at it.
Thank you for sharing that, because I keep telling the same thing to my kids. We all do, right? Because they are in a different place. You can't blame them. I also came through a hard journey here in the US, but it was absolutely not hard compared to you. Naseer, that's what I said. I feel I worked very hard to get here, but when I look at your journey, it was like a cakewalk for me, right? If you really compare. But I keep telling the same things to my kids, that it doesn't matter how fortunate you are. If you're not able to leverage you being fortunate or not going to put this hard work, you're not going to reach much further, right?
In that sense, seeing my dad struggle and take the bus to work while he was a lawyer back home, seeing them potentially lose their house, was something that made me work harder for. So that experience enriched me. As hard as it was, it enriched me. And I'm grateful for that experience. I'm blessed that sometimes we say, I want to give my kids what I didn't have. I wish I could give my kids some of that experience of struggling through and growing, but we can't replicate that, right? Like them being in a refugee camp, them immigrating to here, it's hard to replicate that. Unfortunately, you can give advice to your kids, but at some point it has to click for them based on their experiences. And it's hard to replicate our experiences.
You're absolutely right. I don't have any other questions. You have any other last thoughts, Naseer, for us?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and congratulate you on a phenomenal business that you built.
Oh, thank you so much. It's everyday hard work. I don't celebrate yet. Like we went live 2 days back. I was 4 a.m. alive just to be with my team. They should not just feel that I'm sleeping and they're working hard. And there were a lot of incidences where I could help them just by bringing outside in perspective. Have you thought about this? Because you go live, you always face issues. Right? There is, as I say, no delivery is painless, right? It is going to give you some pain, but it's all about, are you together? As you very rightly said, your mother used to say, we are together and that were the best days. It's not about money and success and how much we had. So
And
so
that's
thank you.
the thing I would say is people think money buys happiness, and I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It gets you comfortable, but it doesn't buy happiness. I know a lot of unhappy rich people. Let me put it that way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of big houses with few people in it. So
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining our podcast.
Same to you all.
Naseer,
Thank you.